Today we're going to use some pre-made inexpensive stair treads combined with some pipe fittings to make a very useful and I think pretty cool looking storage shelf that you can use around your shop, around your home, or wherever it is you need to add a little extra storage space. I'm Jeff and you're watching Home Built Workshop, so stick around. What's going on, and welcome to my workshop. I hope your day is going great. We're doing a little bit of, spring cleaning, even though it's not spring yet. And we decided that we need a little shelving unit to kind of store some things, keep some things better organized. When I sat down to figure out how I was going to approach building this shelving unit, one thing that I decided was important for this project in particular was that I can get it done quickly. I need to get this thing in place in a relatively short amount of time. Now, I looked at a lot of options for materials, including milling up some materials that I have on hand, but almost all of those options were going to require me to glue up several pieces, then you have to sand it all nice and flat, and that's going to add quite a bit of time to the project. While I was looking around my local home center, I found these guys. These are stair treads, and they're designed for, well, stairs. These things are going to be perfect. These are 4 foot long, they're 11.5 inches wide, they're 1 inch thick. It's exactly what I need, but the best part is that these things cost less than $13 at my particular store on the day that I bought these. Your results may vary, but less than $13, I couldn't buy the wood to make this for $13. Now, in my opinion, the only real downside to these is that these are a pine. They're going to be plenty strong. I'm not worried about the strength. It's just that pine is not my personal favorite material. So we're going to add some stain to this here shortly and hopefully change the look of this. So since most of the real woodworking is done, we can start right out with the funnest part of every project, and that's the sanding. Now, I'm not trying to do a whole lot of sanding here. I really just want to break the corners so that it's not really a sharp edge, kind of roll it over just a little bit. There is sort of a bullnose shape on the front, which is kind of cool. We're just going to basically make sure everything is smooth to the touch and there's no sharp edges. It really doesn't take all that long. Another thing to keep in mind while you're sanding is that this is a thin veneer over top of some inner boards, so you can't really sand it too much in any one area, or you do risk sanding through the veneer. Just a light sanding is all we're looking to do. After sanding the pieces with 220 grit sandpaper, I'll then use a clean rag and wipe off all of the dust. We want these pieces to be nice and clean before we begin the finishing process. And now I'm ready to start applying a finish to these pieces. Now, in an effort to save some more time, I'm going to be doing a combination stain and polyurethane all in one. We're just going to brush it on. It's going to add the color as well as the satin polyurethane. I've used products like this in the past, and they work just fine. Super quick to get your color and your top coat all in one. Stir well before using. Especially this. I can feel that the color has separated and it's all kind of in a gelatinous glob at the bottom. The color that I have here is called honey, although the color on the outside of the can looks nothing like the color on the inside of the can. I got fingers crossed that it looks good. I've used honey in other brands and I really like that color. We'll see how this works. Not getting honey out of that. It looks more gray. How can honey be gray? What kind of bees was that made from? Before applying any sort of stain, especially one that I've never used, it's very important to do a test piece. I've got a scrap of a 2x4 here. I'm just going to apply a little bit, make sure that it's the color that I'm okay with. Oh yeah, I think that's going to be all right. I think that's about the color I was hoping for. I think we're okay. It's just weird because it's gray in the can, but when you spread it on, it's brown. It's that water-based stuff for you. Let's apply this. The instructions on the can of finish say to apply thin coats. The problem I ran into with a very thin coat is that it dried almost instantly and I got really visible brush marks. So I found that I had to quickly apply the coat in order to be able to get it smoothed out before it started to dry. I don't know if this issue is due to the dryness in the climate where I'm at, but just something to keep in mind, and another reason why it's important to test a finish on a scrap piece of wood. To help reduce blotchiness in the color as well as brush marks, once you get that first coat on, then you want to go back across the entire piece with long brush strokes from one end to the other. This helps even out any areas where you may have gotten the finish a little heavier than others. So I've got the first coat of finish applied. The instructions on the can say to let it dry for an hour, which I've done. Then it says to sand it with some 400 grit before applying the second coat. And you might be able to tell here as I'm applying this second coat of finish that I'm working a lot quicker than I was the first time around. This is again due to the finish drying so quickly. I'm trying to get minimum brush strokes left in the finish, and this is really the only way that I found to get it to go on smooth. I still ended up with a few visible brush strokes, but I'm not too worried about it. Maybe if I use this finish more in the future, I'll try spraying it with a spray gun and see how that goes. With that last coat of finish dry, we're ready to move on and get this thing assembled. To build the risers that'll support each shelf, I'm going to use common plumbing fittings available at, well, just about any hardware store. The only downside of using plumbing fittings is if you have to buy a bunch of pieces, the costs tend to add up and it can get quite expensive. After doing a little bit of searching around, I found a kit that contains all of the pieces that we're going to need to build this shelf. Now, are these plumbing quality? I don't know, and I probably wouldn't recommend them for plumbing use, but this is exactly what this kit is intended for, so it should work out just fine. We've got a whole bunch of flanges here. Yeah, this is definitely not plumbing grade. This is a really lightweight, really lightweight. These feel decent. Very rough casting, but I'm not too concerned. Got some risers there. We've got several extra pieces here that I'm just going to set aside for maybe another project later on. Again, keep in mind, I would not recommend any of these for plumbing use. I really don't believe that that is what these are intended for. But for this type of a shelf project, it's going to be just fine. If you want to check out this kit for yourself, I'm going to put a link in the video description. You can order one up and build your own shelf like this. These metal parts are shipped with an oily coating to prevent rust. I want to remove that oil by wiping the parts down with some denatured alcohol. Now these floor flanges are very rough casting. These pipes here have some sort of a black coating on there, so I'm not too worried about these rusting, but I think it's possible if you live in a humid environment that these flanges might just rust. In order to prevent that, I think I'm going to give them just a quick coating of just some clear lacquer just to seal them up and help prevent that rust. Now we can go ahead and assemble this thing. Assembling this is really pretty simple. One of the pipe flanges gets threaded onto each end of the risers, and then you can just set it in place on your piece. To make sure everything lines up, I just took a couple scraps of wood and super glued these together just as a little edge guide so that I always get the same spacing. I'll be able to use these on the back to line everything up. The only part that's going to give me trouble is around this front edge, and I'm just going to roughly eyeball the thickness of my spacer block. So now I think we've come to probably the trickiest part in this whole build, and even that's not all that difficult to deal with. I need to drill pilot holes in the locations for the screws so that when we drive the screws in, we don't split the wood. Now, the most obvious choice would be to grab a drill and try to drill, but you can see the body of the drill doesn't line up with the screw hole. So we can't really drill it, otherwise our screw holes are going to be at an angle. One option would be to use a punch, mark the holes, remove the pipe, drill the holes, and then install the screws, probably by hand, because an impact driver probably is not going to get in there very well either. It might, but most likely a hand screwdriver is what we're going to be using. That's one option. Another option is to get one of these 90-degree adapters for a drill. Then you can put your drill bit in there, attach this to your drill, and now you've got kind of a weird looking contraption that gets right in there, although just barely enough so we can drill our pilot holes. Now we can just stack it up. The last screw. There we go. Now, I'm just going to add some casters to the bottom. So that it's easy to roll this thing around wherever I need to. Thankfully, I can use the regular drill, not that 90-degree adapter for this one. These casters that I'm installing are not part of the kit that I purchased with these pipes. I had to get those separately. The kit actually has pipe flanges and stuff that I guess you're supposed to use for feet, but I wanted to add the casters so that everything could move around easily. Now I gotta clean up a mess real quick. All right, let's see if this thing will bridge the gap. And it does. Look at that. I think those casters are gonna work pretty good. That's gonna make it super easy to move around. I wonder who's gonna be the first one to try to ride on the top of this. This little shelf turned out awesome. This is gonna make a huge difference in some organization around the house. You could use this idea for something in the shop if you've got room for something like this, around the house, wherever. Really quick to put together, pretty inexpensive too, using pre-made pine stair treads and an inexpensive kit that I bought online. Links down below in the video description. If you want to make something like this yourself, have fun with it. You could use any kind of finish, stain, whatever. Make it fit your space and get some nice usable storage. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. I gotta go get this thing in place now and get the house put back together. Get some things organized. We'll see you next time.